down. 3 opponents down. Double down. 3 opponents down. 2 for 1. 3 opponents down.
Ladies and gents, my name is Xander, aka Diaslayers, and in this video, we're going to discuss my top 5 exotic weapons for PvP coming the Shadowkeep DLC. Let me just first of all start off by saying that many of the weapons that you are about to see right now are the definition of muff cabbage trash shenanigans. I mean, you guys don't want to go near these things because it's like they're soaking in a hot bath of toxic waste that nobody wants to even touch. When we put it this way, it's obviously clear that these things are not the best, and that's clearly why they're going to be getting a buff. But on top of this though, I also want to mention 2 more things. Number 1, all the base stats that you guys are about to see is coming from the API using light.gg. So if you happen to use a different type of API system, then that's why there might be a few discrepancies here and there. But in correlation with this, I also do all my TTK computations via a frame-by-frame analysis. I don't use what's actually in the game, and rather I literally look at the game footage and go frame by frame to get as much of a precise data output as I possibly can. Number 2, every single one of those TTK computations that I just mentioned is for when the DLC is going to drop, meaning that all these values are going to be happening in Shadowkeep and not what they currently are now. I repeat, not what they currently are now and what they will be, but it's also under the assumption that all the resiliences that we have right now in the game are going to be the exact same way, and so those things might change come Shadowkeep. But now that you guys know this, the only thing left to do is to simply sit back, relax, hit that notification button, and let's jump right into the video. Arriving in the number 5 spot is a hand cannon that many of you may already be your favorite, and you might or might not use it a lot, but I have a feeling that's going to be used quite a lot more come Shadowkeep, and that beauty is known as the malfeasance. Before I go any further, understand that what Bungie is doing come Shadowkeep is they are reducing, and I quote, reducing the effect the range stat has on damage falloff, aka effective range, for this weapon archetype. This means 180, 150, 140, and 110 rate of fire hand cannons are all going to have this quote-unquote effective range nerf. And so what this then means to you is that we have to have weapons that are going to increase these weapons' overall effective range. And luckily for us, that's precisely what this malfeasance is going to do for you with its Explosive Shadow perk. For those of you that don't know, Explosive Shadow states that this weapon shoots tainted slugs that burrow into the enemy, and that stacking enough slugs causes them to explode. To be more exact, all you need is 5 shots, and they can be critical headshots or they can be body shots, and thus you're then going to proc this Explosive Shadow perk. And might I add, every single time that you happen to land those 5 shots in general, it's then going to cause 30 points of damage per slug. And so when you multiply that by 5, that's 150 points of damage. Now some of you might be thinking, okay, well, how exactly is this going to help the weapon's effective range? That, my friends, is the $1 million question. And the answer is that all you have to do is simply land 5 shots. They just have to be doing enough damage of 10 points each. And so if you take 10 points of damage times 5, that's then going to be 50, plus an additional 150 points of damage for the tainted slug explosions. Remember, that Guardian can be cross-mapped literally on the other side of the map, and that's then going to be the exact same outcome that I just described to you, as long as each one of those slugs is just simply doing 10 points of damage. But as you all know, this weapon still has a very good optimal TTK with just 3 crits in one body at 1 second on the dot. In summation, here's all the weapon's PvP stats right there on screen. And so what you're going to notice here is that this thing's then doing 57 per crit, 39 per body, and of course we're then taking into account that 30 times 5 with those tainted slugs when we happen to get those 5 body shots. But the very last thing that I want you to note here is that all these computations were done with a Guardian at 10 resilience, aka 201 points of health. Now if that wasn't convincing enough as to why this thing might just have some of the best range in the entire game, especially for 180 rate of fire hand cannons, well my friends, I got some good news for you as well. Because right there on screen, you guys can see all the weapons base stats. And most notable is that this potentially could have a plus 25 on the weapons base range stat already at 46, making this thing have an effective range at 71 out of 100. Currently, this weapon's base range stat is only at 51, but it might get up to 71, and the reason why we know this to potentially be true is because this thing then has a catalyst in the API that's then telling us that that catalyst is going to increase the weapon's effective range by plus 20. However, this might change between now and when the weapon actually drops with its catalyst, but nonetheless, this is something that I want you guys to keep in mind because when Shadowkeep comes, this malfeasance with or without its catalyst is certainly going to be something to be reckoned with, and that is something that I can say that Oryx knows quite well. Appearing in the number 4 spot is an SMG that some of you may or may not have forgotten about, but I'm here to remind you that you should not forget about this beauty, and it's called the Terrible Tarrabah. Within this upcoming Shadowkeep DLC, this Terrible Tarrabah is going to be phenomenal, and that's because this thing right here, along with the Huckleberry, is getting a 10% damage increase. This then means to you that this weapon's critical damage output is going from 20 to 22, and the weapon's body shot damage is now going from 14 all the way up to 15.4. However, the Tarrabah also happens to have a very unique trait called Ravenous Beast, and when Ravenous Beast is procced, this weapon's damage output is going to be increasing from what it currently is at 30 all the way up to 33. And this then means that it's going to absolutely eradicate, decimate, and obliterate Guardians so much to the point that you won't even recognize them because they'll just be shredded into smithereens. And just doing a little bit of math, this weapon's optimal time to kill when Shadowkeep drops is going to be at precisely 0.67 seconds. And even if you happen to get just body shots, that's still very good because that body shot TTK is at 1 second. If you thought that that was exceptional, oh boy, do I got a treat for you, my friends. Because when this weapon happens to have Ravenous Beast procced, remember, its rate of fire goes up to 900 rounds per minute. And with that damage increase from 30 to 33, it's then going to have an optimal time to kill at 0.33 seconds. Yes, my friends, you heard me right, I said 0.33 seconds. And just so that we don't forget any of the information that I just said, here's all those values right there on screen. Just the same way that it currently works, Ravenous Beast is always going to do the same points of damage for both crits and bodies, but at the same time, I also want you to keep in mind that these values right here were done with the Guardian at 9 resilience, aka 198 points of health. Come Shadowkeep, I can't really say as to whether or not we're still going to have the same overall resilience packages that we currently do now, but what I can say is that given the weapon's base stats, those aren't going to change in the slightest, and you guys can see those right there on screen. The only real way in which these base stats might change is if Bungie intentionally changes them. But what might be much more realistic is if this weapon happens to get a catalyst, and who knows as to what that catalyst might do. It might increase the weapon's rate of fire, it might increase the weapon's overall range, it might just simply increase the reload speed, or it might just increase the stability. Who the heck knows what it could do, but that is highly probable as to how these base stats might change. However, even though I can't say with 110% certainty if these stats are going to change with that catalyst, or if even the weapon's TTK stats with Ravenous Beast proc is still going to be the same as what I'm currently calculating it to be. But if it is, I can definitely say that this thing is going to make enemy Guardians a little bit salty. Inserting itself in the number 3 spot is a fusion rifle that many Guardians overlook, and they shouldn't because it acts very similarly, if not even better, than that of the Wise and Rebuke in the Arantel, and this weapon just so happens to be called the Merciless. As its name suggests, this thing is going to be merciless because not only can it do good in those close and mid-range engagements, but it can do even fantastic in those far and long-range aka cross-map distances because this thing is doing the exact same damage output as what an Arantel or what that of a Wise and Rebuke does. But on top of this, it's also got a very unique intrinsic perk called Impetus, and this perk is going to give it even more damage output while also proccing Feeding Frenzy, and that just so happens to be an intrinsic perk within the perk. To be more precise, Impetus states that reloading immediately after a kill increases the weapon's damage output for a short time. In other words, this is kind of like Kill Clip, but like I said from before, it has the innate intrinsic perk of Feeding Frenzy on top of this, and so you're then going to get that very fast reload speed. But I know I've said a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time, so just so that we don't get confused, here's all the weapons' PvP stats right there on screen. On the left, we have the weapon's base PvP stats. On the right hand side, we happen to have Impetus. And the main thing that I want you guys to take a note from this is that left side is almost identical to just that of a Wise and Rebuke and Arantel, and they're very similar. But when you happen to have Impetus procced, oh my goodness, this thing is going to map you because it can do damage output at 72 per bolt, and that then means that it's only going to require 3 bolts, and in reality, that's then going to equate to an optimal time to kill at 1 second precisely. Now with the weapon's base time to kill stats, that can then kill a Guardian with simply 4 bolts, and it can do so for a Guardian that's at 6 resilience, aka 192 points of health. But when Impetus is brought, it can do so in 3 bolts, and that can be with a Guardian at 10 resilience, aka 201 points of health. And hearing this, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, if this is the case, this thing sounds pretty darn freaking good, so why aren't more Guardians using this thing? The answer to that, my friends, is due to Bungie, and come the Shadowkeep DLC, they've already said that the weapon as it currently is has absolutely no aim assist whatsoever. But when the Shadowkeep DLC drops, booyah baby, we're gonna have some aim assist. And just to put this into perspective, here's all the weapons base stats right there on screen. You'll notice right off the bat that the aim assistance has 3 question marks, and that's simply because we don't know what that's going to be come the Shadowkeep DLC. But what we do know is that when this weapon has the catalyst equipped, it's then going to increase the weapon's range and stability factors by plus 40 each, and coupling all the weapon's other perks on top of this stuff, we're then going to get that this thing has an effective range at 85 out of 100 and a stability factor at 98 out of 100. Diaslayers, I can't tell you as to how astronomically high and how spectacular, marvelous, and gorgeous that those 2 stats are right there, that it simply is mind-boggling as to how awesome that they really are. But when you then couple this with this weapon's unknown aim assistance that's then going to be applied for Shadowkeep, and the weapon's innate recoil direction already at 94 out of 100, that then means that this Merciless is going to cross-map Guardians that much more consistently, and that I can certainly say is going to take enemy Guardians by surprise, and this holds true to the old saying, no mercy. Making itself known in the number 2 spot is a hand cannon that comes from the Greek god Apollo himself, and it's called the Sunshot. And in PvE, this thing is done outstanding on so many levels that I can't even tell you as to how well that it really does. But in PvP, it's simply not the best, and that's because this thing's recoil direction makes it very, very inconsistent. But what I have good news for all of us in this respect is that Bungie has already come out and saying that all 140 and all 150 rate of fire hand cannons are getting their animations reduced. What I mean by this is that this Sunshot can actually fire shots faster than what its recoil is currently allowing the weapon to do, and what that then entails is that you're firing simply too fast because the animation for the recoil is not letting the weapon's reticle reset into the same spot every single time. They also have said is that these weapons' effective range is also going to be reduced, but to you I say, the Sunshot still has some hope. Throughout this game footage so far, you've probably been noticing that this thing's bullet damage is always being separated into 2 values, and for critical headshots, that's 47 plus 21, and for body shots, that's 22 plus 21. This then in turn tells you that regardless of whichever kind of range that you happen to be at, this weapon is always going to do an additional 21 points damage, and that's because it's doing this from its explosive rounds. In turn, this then means to you that this weapon's effective range is still going to be quite good regardless of whichever kind of range engagement that you happen to find yourself in. And so in having said that, you're probably thinking, okay, well, what's this weapon's optimal time to kill really at then? To you I say, that is the same thing that it currently is for all 150 rate of fire hand cannons, meaning that it requires 3 crits and 5 bodies to then obtain the weapon's optimal time to kill at 0.8 and 1.6 seconds respectively. Personally, I've always enjoyed using this Sunshot, and even though this weapon hasn't been the most consistent, but come Shadowkeep, it certainly is going to become much more reliable due to the weapon's change in animation, but the main reason why I haven't been using it is because this weapon's magazine size is so incredibly low, currently right now only at 8 bullets. All I can say is that amen, Bungie has finally answered our prayers, and that's because what they're doing come the Shadowkeep DLC is they're increasing this weapon's magazine size from 8 all the way up to 12, and you guys can see that in the weapon's base stats right there on screen. These stats right there are also taking into account the weapon's base range factor by the weapon's catalyst by plus 30 and the weapon's stability by an additional plus 20. And when you couple all these things together with the weapon's other perks, you're then going to get the weapon's base range stat to be at 77 out of 100 and the weapon's stability stat to be at 71 out of 100. Taking many of these things into account, I think it's safe to say that this weapon's shot rhythm is going to be gorgeous and spectacular in so many ways, But what I don't want you to forget is that even with these things, it's also got the very unique intrinsic perk called Sunblast. And with Sunblast, when you happen to kill targets with this weapon, they then explode into a fiery explosion that's going to incinerate them instantly, but while doing so, it's also going to do potentially up to 100 points of radial damage if the enemy guardians are standing close to them. This Sunshot is not only going to become more reliable, but it just might get that oh so elusive 7th column and make Lord Shaxx go crazy, which might I add is one of the best feelings in Destiny and makes me say, yes please, thank you, come again. At long last, we have finally arrived at our number 1 spot, and the weapon that's going to make enemy guardians soak in its red rose petals is the glorious and beautiful Crimson Handcan. Way back when in Destiny 1, many of you might recall a weapon known as the Red Death, and in Destiny 2, this Crimson is its counterpart. But unfortunately, the Crimson got left behind in the dust, because this thing didn't get retuned when the Forsaken DLC dropped. Newsflash, come the Shadowkeep DLC, that's about to change, since Bungie has already come out saying that this weapon's damage output is going to go from 13.76 to 19 per body shot, and from 24.75 to 30.5 per crit. As usual, we're then going to go do a little bit of magic, or what some like to call mathematics, and get the weapon's optimal time to kill at 0.93 seconds, and this then requires 6 crits in 1 body to obtain this. Looking at body shots and body shots alone, this thing's then going to need 11 body shots, and that's then going to associate to a 1.43 second body shot time to kill. All the stats that you guys see right there on screen is done with how the Crimson will function come the Shadowkeep DLC, and not how it's functioning now. However, when it comes to resilience, that is assumed to have stayed the same, and thus, all these computations were done with a Guardian at 10 resilience, aka 201 points of health. Now some of you might be thinking, but Xander, a 0.93 second time to kill isn't that great for an optimal TTK, so why the heck are you putting this thing in the number 1 spot? To answer that question, Diaslayers, I have 2 points, and the first one is that this beautiful beast has a very unique perk called Cruel Remedy. Cruel Remedy states that getting kills with this weapon heals the wielder every single time, and precision kills also refills the magazine, meaning that you could potentially never ever have to reload. I don't know about you, but this to me sounds very enticing. And this thing leads me to my second point, and that is that with the weapon's catalyst, which gives the weapon an additional plus 20 range, this weapon's range stat, in conjunction with its other perks, is going to be crazy instantly dumbfounding at 96. 96! I'll say it again, 96! My friends, that is simply outrageous and gorgeous on so many levels, but when you couple this with say the weapon's base stability stats, it's going to be even better, because its overall shot rhythm is going to be that much more incredibly consistent, and that then is going to allow you to land crit after crit after crit. Let's also not forget that with this thing right here, it's classified as a hand cannon, but in all honesty, it functions like a pulse rifle, so with the weapon's stability stat being so high, it becomes that much more consistent and getting the weapon's optimal time to kill that much more frequently. With all these pros, I ask you the question, will this Crimson become meta? Maybe, maybe not, and I think that's too soon to say, but nonetheless, this is something that you absolutely have to get your hands on, since it might obliterate every Guardian in its path, just like Exodia, send them all to the Shadow Realm. Of course, we can't have a top 5 list without a few honorable mentions, and in this case, I believe that those 2 beauties are going to be the Polaris Lance and the J-Rabbit Exotic Scout Rifles. Earlier within the introduction of this video, you guys were seeing the Polaris Lance, and right now you're seeing the J-Rabbit. But the reason why I believe that these 2 things have become that much more viable is because right now, they're still very good, and they can do excellent on some laning maps as well as some longer range maps. But even though they aren't getting anything done to them to actually buff them, in reality, they're still getting a buff. And that's because everything else in the game, especially hand cannons, are getting that range nerf along with pulse rifles. And when you couple these 2 things together, that then means that these scout rifles are finally going to have a place in the Crucible. It doesn't matter whether or not you're using them in quick play or using them in competitive or whatever kind of engagement that you happen to find yourself in. These 2 scout rifles are extremely promising, and they're only going to get better. So let me know what you guys think about that down in the comment section below, as well as what you think of this entire video. Do you think that the exotics mentioned in this video are going to be viable or that much more viable come Shadowkeep, Or do you think that they're just going to be mediocre? Or do you think that they're just going to be complete garbage? And so no matter what you guys think, you always know that I'm going to respect your opinions, and that is something that I can guarantee. Lastly, be sure to watch the newest, check the latest, and share a comment like on social media because you are the greatest. That's pretty much all I've got for you as of right now, Diaslayers. And as always, GG TNT.